There are places in Tennessee where the trees grow thick and the silence runs deep, places where legends walk just out of sight. These 8 first-hand encounters come from ordinary people who saw something extraordinary. Whether you're a believer or a skeptic, one thing's certain. After hearing these stories, you'll never look at the woods the same way again. I'll never forget that night. March 3rd, 2012. It started like any other backwoods hangout, just me and my buddy Clay out by Norris Lake, killing time the way we always did. Fire, stars, tobacco, and a 4-wheeler ride into the wild. We knew these woods like the backs of our hands, or at least we thought we did. It was still winter, but the moon was blazing bright over Anderson County, casting ghost-white light on the Appalachian forest. We rode out to where Mill Creek empties into the lake, a spot with an eerie, swampy edge and a rock outcropping. We got there around 9:30 p.m. and lit a fire, just unwinding. From across the water, 2 owls hooted back and forth like they were in a rhythm, and we kept hearing movement in the tree line, maybe 60 yards out. Probably deer, we said, brushing it off. But then, the wind, which had been howling through the branches, just stopped. Dead calm. No owl calls, no water splashing, just stillness. It was like the entire forest had inhaled and held its breath. At midnight, we started packing up to leave. That's when we heard it. Sticks cracking in the trees. Not just 1 or 2, but a pattern, deliberate, stalking. I felt it first, that eerie sensation like someone staring at you from the dark. I don't know what got into me, but I suddenly grabbed a piece of cedar and knocked it against a nearby cypress. Dumb move. Probably inspired by watching Finding Bigfoot. I didn't expect anything. But Clay froze. "Did you hear that?" he whispered, breathing heavy. He said he heard a knockback. I thought he was messing with me. Until I knocked again. 3 sharp, unmistakable knocks answered. Clear, heavy, delayed. Not an echo. Something was out there, and it was responding. The fear set in deep. My hands were shaking. I tried again, this time adding a whooping call. We got 1 single knock back, and then it hit us. A growl, guttural, primal. I can't explain it, like a deep-chested gorilla crossed with a lion's snarl, but twisted, wrong. It was like the thing had 2 sets of vocal cords. We were done. Panic kicked in. We jumped on the 4-wheeler and gunned it toward the sound like a couple of idiots, stopping now and then to listen. But all we felt was hatred in the air. Not just fear, but like the woods themselves wanted us gone. We never saw it, but we felt it. And that's worse in some ways. I'm telling you, something ancient and angry watched us that night. It knew we were there, and it didn't want us back. December 14th, 2004. It was weirdly warm for winter in Blount County, Tennessee. My hunting buddy and I were in the Chilhawi area, a remote, rugged place tucked 20 miles south of Maryville, near the North Carolina line. We'd spent the afternoon in tree stands, watching for deer. About an hour before sunset, around 4:30 p.m., we climbed down and met up in a holler about 100 yards from our stands. We were chatting and getting ready to head back to the 4-wheeler when we heard it. A low, rumbling moan, deep in that holler we had just walked out of. We froze. I looked at him. He looked at me. "Blow from a deer?" I whispered. "Maybe," but something felt off. We crouched at the edge of a nearby field, listening, trying to spot movement. Then, splash. We both jerked our heads toward the sound. There's a little drinking hole in the holler fed by a creek trickling down from the mountains. That's where the splash came from. "What the hell was that?" he hissed. Another splash, louder this time. We crept 20 yards closer, and that's when we saw it. It stood on 2 legs, at least 7, maybe 8 feet tall. Broad, massive, easily 300 or 350 pounds. But it wasn't a bear, no way. Bears don't walk like that. This thing was upright the whole time, confident, a beast, sure, but almost human. It didn't run, didn't panic, it just watched us. Lingering in the same spot like it had nothing to fear. We locked eyes with it for maybe a minute before it casually turned and walked over a ridge, like it had better things to do. We didn't chase it, hell no. We backed out fast and drove home, still trying to process it. Told our folks what we saw and got the usual, "Y'all seen a bear?" But I've hunted bear for years. This was no bear, it was a Sasquatch, I swear it. And so does my buddy. This happened a few years back, but the memory haunts me. I lived just 3.5 miles outside Tullahoma, Tennessee, surrounded by thick woods, creeks, and hollow ground riddled with caves and sinkholes. It's wild country, beautiful and strange. It was sometime in April, between 2011 and 2013. Early morning, maybe 5:30 a.m. The sky was just starting to lighten, still heavy with shadows. I was pulling out of my driveway, heading to work. As I looked left, movement caught my eye on the embankment by the road. At first I thought it was a man, but no man moves like that. A towering figure stepped down onto the road, huge, dark, almost like it was wearing a fur coat, but it wasn't clothes, it was hair, thick, coarse. Its head was oddly cone-shaped, and it walked with this smooth, eerie grace. It stopped in the middle of the road and turned to look at me, like it knew I was there, like it had been waiting. We stared at each other for a long moment, me frozen behind the wheel, heart pounding. Then it turned and calmly vanished into the woods, across the street, slipping into the underbrush like it had always belonged there. I waited a little longer, hoping, or dreading, it would come back out. But it didn't. That morning changed everything. After that, strange things started happening in our neighborhood. My dad swore he kept seeing a massive brownish-black bear across the street. Our neighbor's grandson came running up one day saying, "There's a big gorilla in the backyard." And at night, those sounds, I'll never forget those sounds. A scream, a howl, a growl, twisted together, inhuman. They echoed through the trees, sometimes accompanied by a stench, like wet dog and mildew, thick enough to make you gag. Whatever's out there doesn't want to be seen. But sometimes it watches. And if you're unlucky like me, sometimes it lets you see it back. I don't want it caught. I don't want it caged. I just want to know what it is. Because whatever I saw that April morning, it was real. It walked like a man, looked like a beast, and it watched me like it understood everything. It was the end of April, 1994. I remember because the chill of winter had finally lifted, and the air had that early spring smell, muddy, earthy, full of life. My dad, finally feeling strong again after breaking his hip in the ice storm, decided to take my fishing boat out to his favorite spot on Cypress Creek near Jackson, Tennessee. Said he needed the peace, the quiet. That place was sacred to him. He'd lived his whole life in those woods, knew every bend in the Forked Deer River like it was drawn into his skin. So when he didn't come home that evening, I wasn't too worried at first. But when my mom called me around 9 p.m., her voice trembling, I felt a cold knot tighten in my chest. I'd gone out to find him before when he lost track of time. But that night was different. I grabbed a friend and a couple of flashlights, and we headed out down Highway 152. The only way to reach his fishing spot is by water or a hike. So we walked along the east side of Cypress Creek, calling his name, shining lights across the dark water. Then we heard it. A clicking sound, rhythmic. Not a bug, not like any insect I'd ever heard. It was sharp, like something trying to mimic nature but failing. That's when we saw them. 2 sets of glowing red eyes reflecting off our flashlights from the north bank of the Forked Deer River. Not animal eyes. These were high off the ground, motionless, watching. We froze. My friend whispered, "What the hell is that?" We scanned with our lights and spotted my dad's boat on the opposite bank. The creek was too wide and deep to cross on foot, so we doubled back to the road to cross the bridge and make our way down the west side. As we ran, we called a cousin to meet rescue at the bridge. When we reached the boat, the horror hit. My dad was floating in the water beside it, the rope from the boat clutched in his hand, like he'd tied himself to it, trying not to drift away. We dragged him aboard and tried CPR, but it was too late. He was gone. And the eyes? They were still there, still watching from the opposite bank. As we started paddling upstream toward the bridge, something kept thudding against the bottom of the boat. The water there is 20 feet deep. Nothing should have been touching us. I shouted into the dark, "Come on, you SOB, you got him, but you're not getting me!" Only when we got far enough away did the paddling get easier. Later, the coroner said it was a heart attack. But I've never stopped wondering, did he see something that scared him so bad his heart gave out? Or were those eyes guiding us to him? I've gone back in daylight, seen where those eyes stood, and whatever it was tall, massive. Some people might think this sounds crazy, but I don't. Not anymore. I think they were watching over him, They knew him, maybe even mourned him. The clicking sound, maybe that was them calling to us, telling us, he's here, come get him. I'll never forget that night. It's been years since that morning, but it's still as vivid in my mind as the day it happened. Back in 2005, I was living in Fairfield Glade, a quiet little retirement community on the Cumberland Plateau, east of Crossville. Most folks here spent their time golfing or tending to gardens. Me, I preferred solitude in the forest. Hiking had always been my thing. It grounded me, cleared my mind. That morning was like so many others. Early, peaceful, a faint mist still lingering along the trails as I walked. I was about 4 miles from home, well beyond the reach of most walkers, when I came across an unexpected clearing. The area had clearly once been a road or path, grass had overtaken it, and the trees hadn't yet claimed it back. It was rare to see sunlight break through like that in those parts, with the tall, old-growth trees usually forming a thick canopy. The warmth of the clearing felt almost inviting, until I rounded the bend and froze. Something leapt out of the woods into the sunlit clearing just ahead. It was massive and fast, like an explosion of movement. I watched in stunned silence as it pounced on something moving on the ground. When it stood back up, it was holding a snake by the head. That image is seared into my memory. Its hands were enormous, wrapped tight around the writhing body of that long snake like it was nothing more than a twig. And then, just as quickly, it was gone, back into the forest cover, like it had never been there at all. I stood there, paralyzed. My brain raced. Did it see me? Should I hide? Run? Tree climbing was out of the question. I could hear my own heart hammering in my chest like it might burst. Logic was failing me, instinct taking over. I turned and ran, full speed. I didn't stop until I was nearly home. I didn't tell a soul. Not my neighbors, not even my wife. Who would believe me? A massive, ape-like creature in East Tennessee? They'd laugh me out of the community. So I buried it, convinced myself it was imagination, a trick of the light, a dream. But then, years later, I saw a commercial for that Finding Bigfoot show. The moment they played that sound, that deep, resonant, guttural scream, I nearly dropped the remote. It was the same sound my wife and I heard one night not long after my sighting, when we were sitting out on the back deck under the stars. We were listening for the whippoorwill that always nested across the street, but instead of birdsong, the stillness was torn open by a roar. No other word fits it. A wild, primal scream that seemed to echo off every tree on the plateau. We both jumped. My wife stood up so fast her chair nearly tipped. "What the hell was that?" he said, scanning the woods. I remember the look on her face. It wasn't confusion, it was fear. At the time, he thought maybe a mountain lion, but I'd never heard one sound like that, and neither had he. Not that deep, not that human. It was coming from the same woods, the same direction I'd seen it vanish into. After watching that show and hearing that same cry, everything snapped into place. I hadn't imagined it, I hadn't dreamed it. I saw something in that clearing, something real. I haven't stepped into those woods since, and I used to love those trails. They were a part of me. But after that day, something deep inside told me, don't go back. Not because it would harm me, but because I wasn't supposed to see it in the first place. Back in 1988, I was 13 years old and living just outside Nashville, Tennessee. Like most boys my age, I was obsessed with four-wheelers, dirt roads, and finding ways to scare the life out of my younger stepbrother. My dad would take us out to this patch of land one of his customers owned, about 10 or 15 miles west of the city, along Highway 70. It was the perfect place for adventure. Old logging roads, winding hollers, creeks that cut through the hills. That day, early October, still warm, still dry, I was tearing through the woods on my ATV, my 9-year-old stepbrother clinging to my back like a terrified little spider monkey. He hated how fast I drove, so he always kept his head tucked between my shoulder blades. That afternoon the sun was still high, maybe 2 hours before dark. We were riding along a stretch of old logging road that curved through a valley between two ridges. The power company had cleared a 150-foot wide swath for the power lines, and while it had grown up thick with brush again, the trail was still passable. Just before we hit the power line cut, the road made this weird little dogleg, a sharp zigzag to the right, then immediately back to the left. I loved flying through that section, fishtailing just enough to make my stepbrother scream. But what happened next has stayed with me for over 3 decades. As we blasted through the dog leg, something huge darted out of the brush on the left side of the trail, directly in front of us. I didn't even have time to hit the brakes. It was tall, easily over 7 feet, and moving faster than anything that size should be able to. Covered in shaggy dark brown hair. 2 legs, not a bear, not a person. It didn't even glance at us. It just moved. It took maybe 2 steps max to clear the 12-foot wide road and vanish into the thick brush on the other side. Gone. Just like that, I hit the throttle. Full speed. My heart was trying to crawl up my throat. It felt like I had just missed being in a fatal car crash. That stunned, sick kind of adrenaline. I screamed back to my brother, asking if he'd seen it, but of course he hadn't, head down the whole time, hiding from me. He thought I was trying to mess with him. I wasn't. I couldn't even go back right away. I made a huge loop through the property, trying to calm down. It took almost an hour for me to find the nerve to drive back past that spot. The only problem? That stretch of trail was the only way back to where my dad had parked his truck. So, eventually, I went back. First time through, I floored it again. Couldn't help it. I didn't want to see it again. But curiosity got the better of me. Right as the sun started dipping below the hills, I returned on my 4-wheeler, slower this time, scanning the underbrush. I didn't find tracks. It was too dry for that. No smell, no sounds. But the brush on the sides of the trail was disturbed, like something big had plowed through it. I never told my dad. He would have laughed, or worse. Told me I'd been out in the heat too long. I didn't tell anyone for years. But that moment still replays in my head like a movie. The timing, the movement, the size. It wasn't just some blurry glimpse in the woods. It ran right in front of me. And even though it's been decades, I've never shaken the feeling that it didn't want to be seen. That it was a mistake. I caught it at all. A blink in time where the woods pulled back their curtain just long enough to reveal something we're not supposed to understand. This happened in the summer of 1985, but even now I can still see it. I was at my mother's house just outside Charlotte, Tennessee, about 4 miles east, in a quiet little place called the Greenwood Community. It was a sunny afternoon around 3 o'clock. Clear skies, warm air drifting in through the screen door. I was in the kitchen with my mom and 2 of my nieces. We were having one of those lazy day conversations, the kind that happens when there's nothing urgent pulling you anywhere else. My mom had a big picture window and a door with a clear view of the backyard, wide open, bordered by tall grass and thick woods beyond. I happened to glance out mid-sentence, and that's when I saw it. At first I couldn't speak, couldn't process what I was looking at. It was huge, easily 7 feet tall, covered head to toe in dark brown, maybe black hair. It was moving on 2 legs, fast, but not running like a human would. It had this smooth, gliding stride, its long arms swinging as it moved with its shoulders hunched slightly forward, almost like it was built for speed. I stood up and blurted out, "My God, what is that?" One of my nieces turned and saw it too. For a moment, we both stood there, frozen in disbelief. Whatever it was, it moved from the tall weeds bordering the yard and sprinted right across the open grass. In the daylight, no effort to hide, it slipped behind our small storage building near the back of the property, like it had done this 1,000 times before. We rushed to the back door, but stopped short of stepping outside. I think we were all expecting it to come back into view, but it never did. None of us were brave enough to go look. We were stunned. The moment was surreal, like watching something happen in a dream and knowing it's not supposed to be real, but you're wide awake. We waited a long time before we even ventured into the yard, and by then, it was long gone. There were no sounds, no odor, no broken branches, just the memory of how fast it had moved and the overwhelming feeling that we were dealing with something not supposed to exist. To this day, I believe it stepped over the fence behind the storage building and disappeared into the woods beyond, where the land dips into a ravine and rises again into rolling hills covered in forest. That was the first and last time we ever saw it, but I still remember how close it came. No blurry image, no distant shadow. It was in the yard, broad daylight, just 100 feet away, and it moved with purpose, like it had somewhere to be, like it had done this before. They say there's peace in solitude, that when you're out in the wilderness with no walls, no phones, no distractions, you find a kind of quiet the modern world can't offer. But sometimes, That silence isn't empty. It was July 22nd, 2006. I was camping alone deep in the Citico Creek area of Tennessee, not far from the North Carolina border. I'd gone lightway, just a hammock strung between two trees and the stars above me. It was the kind of place where the forest presses in thick and alive. You could vanish in those woods and never be found. I'd set up camp off a gravel road about 4 miles in from the turnoff before the Indian Boundary campground. Followed a narrow trail another mile or so to a little clearing on the left. It was remote, wild, perfect. That night around 10 p.m. I was settling into my hammock, fire just starting to die when I heard something barreling down the steep hill across the trail. At first I thought deer, or maybe a black bear. There's plenty of both in those parts, but whatever this was, it stopped before reaching the bottom and started tracking parallel to the trail. Not normal animal behavior. I got up, heart already pounding, and threw more wood on the fire. Letting the flames rise was my only defense. I didn't have a weapon on me, just a flashlight that barely cut through the overgrowth. Then, it crossed the trail, about 50 yards away. I couldn't see it through the thick vegetation, but I could hear the brush moving. Heavy movement. Too heavy to be a deer, definitely not a dog. It kept circling, always out of view, but close enough that I could follow its progress by sound. Crunch, pause, crunch, then silence. Then again, crossing the trail above me this time. It did this for hours. Sometimes it was behind me, then above me, then down by the creek. Always shifting, always moving, as if it were testing me, watching, waiting. I've spent a lot of nights in the woods, but I'd never felt like this. I was not alone. And whatever was out there, it wasn't just curious, it was deliberate, intelligent. The circling didn't stop until well after 2 a.m. I barely slept, just lay there in the hammock, listening, eyes darting in every direction, gripping my flashlight like it could save me. When the sun finally crept through the trees, I didn't waste a second. I packed my gear in record time and hiked out, constantly glancing over my shoulder. Later, I told a few friends about what happened. They shrugged. Probably a bear or a coyote. No, this wasn't some predator looking for food. It never got too close. It never made a sound beyond movement. No growl, no grunt. Just that rhythmic pacing. That deliberate circling. It knew I was there. It was watching me all night long. And after doing some research, I found stories. Others who had strange encounters near the North Carolina and Tennessee border. That's when I realized I wasn't the first. And I won't be the last. Whatever's in those woods, it watches the lonely ones, the quiet ones, the ones who think they're completely alone. And I'm telling you now, I don't camp solo anymore. There are places in Tennessee where the trees grow thick and the silence runs deep, places where legends walk just out of sight. These 8 first-hand encounters come from ordinary people who saw something extraordinary. Whether you're a believer or a skeptic, one thing's certain after hearing these stories: you'll never look at the woods the same way again. Some say Bigfoot is just a myth, but after hearing these stories, maybe it's not about believing. Maybe it's about listening to those who've seen the impossible. If you enjoyed these chilling encounters, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who thinks they'd be brave enough to spend a night in the woods. You never know what might be watching.